Welcome to Fur, Fins, and Feathers. I am particularly excited as we open today's show to host a good friend of mine, Dr. Tracie Laliberte, who we have known each other for almost 40 years.
We have, yes.
And we have been very good friends, and Tracie has done many wonderful things and wonderful series of accomplishments all over the world. Welcome. We're very honored to have you today.
Thank you, Brian. I'm very happy to be here to talk with you. And I brought along my friend Boris. He's a 4.5-year-old Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, imported from Poland, a show dog and a therapy dog as well. Bless you.
We know about your long history in dogs, but how did you start?
So when I was in the 4th grade, my mother was a volunteer at the school. Give me 1 second here. And so my fifth grade math teacher one weekend invited me to come to a dog show. You okay? All right. Invited me to come to a dog show, and I went in the back of her van to this dog show behind someone's house. And that was the beginning of a whole lifetime of loving dogs, talking about dogs, training dogs, showing dogs, and all dogs all the time.
And giving Boris some water.
Giving Boris some water. And one of the most important things about my dogs is knowing when they have a need and I have to fill the need.
And that's very important.
That's better?
Good job, Boris.
Feeling better.
Tell us about some of the biggest wins you've had.
So when I was 9 years old, back then, we used to have dog shows at armories and places like the Cape Cod Mall. And I remember my first dog show was at the Cape Cod Mall.
That was my first time I ever went to a dog show
they had them,
and exhibited.
Yeah, so they closed the mall on Sundays, and they used to open the rings, and they used to let us show in the mall. And I was a junior handler. I was 9 years old. You okay? I was 9 years old, and I lied about my age because you had to be 10 to show in juniors. But back then it didn't matter because it wasn't taken very seriously. The junior handlers weren't. And so I went to the dog show at the Cape Cod Mall, and that was my first junior handling win. Then after that, I showed in junior handling for a great deal of my life. And in 1983, I was best junior handler at Westminster Kennel Club. And then in 1984, I was best junior handler at Crufts Dog Show in England.
And you skyrocketed. You became world famous.
Yes, world famous champion dog handler. At that time, though, we weren't allowed to bring our own dogs to England. So I showed my own dog here at Westminster, but at Crufts, I had to borrow a dog. So I had a good friend of mine who knew someone to loan me a dog over in England. And when I got there, I met the dog like 20 minutes before I showed it. And we went in the ring and we showed. And
what breed was it?
It was a Lhasa Apso.
Okay.
It was a Lhasa. And then, of course, they had us change dogs. So you would get a different handler's dog. So the finalists had to were given a dog from the crowd. So I was given a German Shepherd from the crowd that I had met like 2 seconds before I started to show it. It really challenged or tested your ability to handle a dog, especially when you didn't know. And now I was world champion.
And that was a wonderful, wonderful honor.
Yep, I was 19 years old. I was a senior in high school.
Very good. And then you went on to do what?
So my family had an all-breed kennel, and out of high school, it was, do I go to college? Do I take a year off? I went into the family business. So it was a full all-breed kennel and a full-service grooming salon. And I worked at the grooming salon and ran the whole division by myself. So I didn't really need to go back to college, but I was kind of bored. So I decided to take a class at Stonehill College. I was 22 years old at the time. I took one class at night while I worked full-time in the kennel during the day, and I loved it. The next thing I knew, I was taking 5 classes a semester, classes during the summer, classes on Saturdays. And in 4 years, I graduated with a bachelor's degree from Stonehill College.
Wow, that is I didn't know that.
Yep.
That is fabulous.
It was really great. My major was communication, my minor was law, and I really loved learning the learning part of it. And I still worked at the kennel, full time during the day, and I would rush off to class at night and come home and study, and then the next morning get up and go, tend to my duties with the dogs. But I graduated from Stonehill, and I was still working at the kennel, making a good living there.
What a wonderful experience. Stonehill is a great school.
Oh, I love Stonehill. In fact, I was just looking on their website yesterday just to follow up and see what was going on over there. So that was a great experience for me. And then I took a year off. And a year later, I thought, geez, I should get a master's degree because I missed school so much. So I looked around for a couple different universities that I thought would, be somewhere that I would enjoy going, that were able to fulfill my needs of needing to go to class at night after working full-time during the day and not have to have the pressure of, a time frame to complete my studies. And I found Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. And in the humanities department there, it was a nice blend or, mesh with my communications degree from.
Nice tie-in from Stonehill.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So I went there for my master's studies, and I could take one class at a time, take classes during the summer, and I thoroughly enjoyed going to the campus.
A gorgeous campus.
Beautiful campus. Who would not like taking classes in mansions, that's for sure. I got a master's degree from Salve Regina in the humanities. I loved it so much. I thought, I took a year off, and I thought, why not go back and do some Ph.D. work? The next thing I knew, I was completing my coursework for my Ph.D. in the humanities, and when it came time they were asking me, what do you want to do a dissertation on? I originally thought I would do my dissertation on the printing press, because, Salve Regina, the overriding question is what it means to be human in the age of technology. So at the university, we studied these important technological advancements that have affected the human condition over time. And so we studied things like, the invention of the printing press and the invention of the gas-powered engine, nuclear technology, war technology, the automobile, tracing on, up until the computer technology. And so I thought, what technology could I study? Printing press is interesting and very important, but my brain said, the dog is a technology. It's one of those technologies that is kind of overlooked. We don't think of a technology when we look at this. But I would have to say that the dog is one of those, the domestication of the dog is one of those technologies that really changed the course of human history forever.
And continues to do so.
And continues to do so. So I boldly said, I think I'll do my dissertation on the dog. And of course, my peers were like high-ranking officials from the Navy War College who were, doing things like Star Wars and looking at, surveillance from outer space and, just war theory. And I was kind of like, I think I'm going to study the dog as a technology. But as it turned out, it was it has made a very important contribution to the literature on human-animal relationships. And what a fascinating topic to research.
And you are pioneering.
I am pioneering. My dissertation studied the human-canine.
What is your title?
My title, it sounds very fancy, but it is Archaeology and Anthropology in Human-Canine Relationships and Encounters with the Sacred, which is a very fancy way of saying noses to the sky, how dogs create heaven on earth.
That is perfect. That is so beautiful.
So I wrote a lot about how our relationships with dogs create opportunities for us to experience profound awe. And by that I mean, I looked at things like, first I traced the history of the human-canine bond in a sacred context. So on the one hand, we have our relationships with dogs, and we have humans treating dogs like they can be thrown away. And that's like what we call device theory. So they are mass-produced, they are bought like Walkmen, and when they're broken, we throw them into the shelter. So on the one hand, we have that aspect of the way we view our dogs. And on the other end of that spectrum is, this is not only a technology, but it's also a living, breathing animal. And so connections to nature have a way of bringing us back to being connected with the world in an inextricable way. So I traced the human-canine history also with us looking at the dog as something from nature that can enable us to experience profound awe. I looked at our relationship with dogs, as a focal experience or peak experience, where the time we spend with our dogs is that brings us profound happiness, the greatest good, according to Aristotle. I looked at our relationships with dogs through the eyes of the dog as a model of God. Non-judgmental acceptance, unconditional love, in the moment all the time. Yes, I know. So dogs can teach us about ourselves and can teach us about the experience of a higher power, God, if you will.
What a fascinating topic.
I had no idea that I would find things that I've never seen before and make connections that I've never seen before. So in that regard, my study is very foundational for other people to look at what I've written and to build upon it. I draw from purebred dogs extensively, and not just that, but a lot of my data comes from, so it's archaeology and anthropology, so I study culture and I study artifacts or things that are left behind. So we think about remains, like dog remains, as like bones, and we think of it like skeletons. But in my study, dog remains are like things like writings about dogs, oral traditions about dogs, articles from the New York Times, books written about dogs, things like the stars and the constellations. Aristotle writes extensively about dogs. Most people don't know that. Darwin writes about dogs. So I looked at all these things and I made these really cool connections and draw out some new ideas that really have never been seen before.
Now you teach at Dean Junior College.
I teach at Dean College in Franklin. I'm in the English.
Is it now called Dean College?
It's Dean College.
Okay.
It went from a 2-year college to a 4-year college.
Excellent.
I've been teaching there for 3 years. I've actually been teaching in academia for about 10 years now. I teach in the English and Literature department at Dean as an adjunct. I love it. It's really fantastic. I love my students, and it gives me an opportunity to give students the kind of experience I had as a learner. My hope is that I give them the same kind of passion I had when I was a student from my instructors.
This is fascinating.
Boris?
And when I ever saw on Facebook, saw your pictures, and you in that beautiful blue gown.
Yes.
And your hat with your
my little tam with the
your tam and tassel.
Yep.
I said, she's made it. This is great.
You know, I never intended for that to happen. Like when I started getting educated, I never thought that I would go to this. It wasn't my plan to say, well, I think I'll get a Ph.D. In fact, I would take a class and I would say, okay, I paid for my education myself. How am I going to pay for this? How many dogs do I have to groom to pay for my books for this particular class? Want to lie down? Want to get down? There you go. How many poodles do I have to groom to pay for my textbooks? And I just took one class after another until I had completed.
Salve is a wonderful, wonderful school.
And they're very open-minded about new ideas. That's the great thing about their academic approach. Oh, good boy. Is that when I had proposed that I would like to write about the dog, they weren't naysayers. They were inviting, something new and fun and fresh. And
innovative changes.
And really supportive of this. Boris is doing his job, his therapy job.
You are a wonderful pup.
Best boy. Come here, Boris.
No, Salve has always, to me at least, been very, and I've written a lot of stories about Salve, and
Yeah.
I've worked for the magazine, for the,
Oh, yeah.
for the school publication. And they are always open to new ideas.
Well, they have that holistic counseling department there. That was phenomenal. They had, so it's kind of alternative ways of experiencing, it's not contrary to medical model. And like really fascinating, cutting edge, interesting, alternative views on being.
Talk about your work in pet therapy.
So Boris, he's from Poland, and I brought him over for his pedigree. Of course, I raise and I show Cavaliers here in this country.
Do you still work with losses?
I only judge losses. I don't have any more losses.
You judge losses.
I judge losses as a judge, AKC judge, yeah. But so I have Cavaliers, and I brought him over because he's got a really fantastic pedigree, and I thought it'd be fun to introduce something or important to introduce some new genes to our gene pool over here. So
He is a handsome fellow.
he's an American-Canadian grand champion. He was the #1 winning Cavalier in the province of Quebec in 2017. I brought him over from Poland in 2000, when he was 7 months, and he didn't know any English. So I took him to a puppy training class so I could bond with him, and I could teach him English. So he learned, basic obedience commands, and in the process of bonding with him, I thought he had such good character that my instructor and I looked at him and thought, he would make a really good therapy dog. So we went from getting a Canine Good Citizen title to being evaluated as a therapy dog. And so he's been working with the Alliance of Therapy Dogs for I think about 3 years now. And he visits UMass Dartmouth School of Law, UMass Dartmouth regular school. Regularly he's done Bridgewater State University. He also likes working with little kids too, so he does an after-school program at the Berkeley Community School called Dog University, and a summer camp for kids.
And what has that taught you?
What has working with the therapy dog taught me?
Yes.
So it has. I have watched and witnessed how being with an animal can really make a person feel better. I've seen students at the college go from having these severe faces to seeing the dog and that all melts away, and they pet the dog and they start to talk about how much they miss their dogs, and their stress of the day just kind of goes away. I had a therapy dog before this one, and I did volunteer work at a nursing home. And so people who want to do pet therapy, they think, well, I want to do pet therapy in a particular venue. But that's really not how it works. You get a therapy dog and you let them decide what populations they like. So when I was working with Boris, trying to decide what kind of people he wanted to work with, I brought him to some nursing homes and he liked it. And I brought him to a rehab center and he liked it. But I think it was kind of boring for him. So when I brought him to schools where there's lots of kids and lots of activity, he liked that a lot better. But before I had Boris as a therapy dog, I had another one before him. And she loved rehab centers and loved nursing homes. And I remember going to this one nursing home one time, and I brought her in weekly. And one week we were visiting, and we had a person who brought us in every week, and 1 week she was on vacation. So I had a different person bring us from room to room. And we went into this one room, and you ask the people there if they'd like to pet with the dog. And this one woman, she had a stroke, and she was in a wheelchair. And my therapy dog walked over to her, and she could lift one hand, and she petted the dog. And it was a very nice visit, and so we dismissed ourselves and we left. And as we were walking down the hallway, I looked behind me and she was following me in the wheelchair. And so the person that was guiding me along, the nurse person who was with me, he looked and he said, she hasn't been out of her room in 6 months. And so every time I went to visit after that, she was in her wheelchair in the doorway of her room, waiting to see the dog come visit. So to give her that kind of desire to want to interact was just so profound and
That was a great incentive.
Oh, so wonderful. And so doing therapy work is such a joyful thing to me. When he brings his magic to people, I leave and I can't even, my cheeks hurt from smiling, because watching the interaction for me is so rewarding. It's so rich to see how much beauty and how much happiness and joy he can bring to people who want to interact with him.
And as a patient who recently recovered from a very severe stroke,
I remember. Did they have therapy dogs there for you?
in one of the rehab facilities in Boston, they did.
Yep.
And of course I loved it because they brought the dogs to me.
Did you? Was it on your calendar? So you'd be like, oh, Monday the dogs are going to come?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Do you look forward to that?
And I have been working lately in Acushnet at the Memory Cafe.
Oh, really?
With patients who come from a variety of challenges,
Yeah.
most of whom are from they're Alzheimer's patients.
Really? Yes, and I know. So I know the therapy work is an area that has so much potential, tremendous potential. And as the medical community begins to embrace this alternative modality of bringing a dimension to healing, come here. You can see the benefits. You can see the advantages of having a dog that's suited to work with a particular group of patients.
A couple of months ago, I brought a group from the Wampanoag Kennel Club
Yep.
to what they call the Memory Cafe.
Yeah.
And they loved the clients loved it. They really got a lot out of it. And I recently saw a couple of them at another meeting, and they said to me,
Bring the dogs.
"Can you bring the dogs?"
Bring the dogs. You know, so pet therapy is something that goes back to, Greek and Roman times when, dogs would be part of the healing process. Good boy. People don't realize that, therapy work goes back for, centuries to, early times. They had temples that were erected for the curative lick of dogs. So the people would go to the temples and the dogs would lick people, and they would have miraculous moments of healing. They'd leave like stones at the temple for the cynotherapist. The dogs would give a healing lick, thanking the dog for curing them of whatever ailments they had. Now you could say that, if a person had a wound on their leg and maybe it was, infected, the dog's saliva is known to be antibacterial. Perhaps the dog licked the wound and got the circulation going and, killed the bacteria. Maybe that's what happened. You could be a medical model about it. Or you could just say that the wellness that comes from, when you pet a familiar dog, your heart rate lowers, their heart rate lowers, and this whole magic.
I'm ready to take him
Magic.
home.
Look at him, isn't he great? He likes the floor, it's nice and cool.
So tell us, when's the book coming?
Well, I've been working on getting it out to some publishers. It's about 300 pages, and it's going to need some editing, obviously. The way it's written now is as a dissertation. It's very academic in nature, but in writing the dissertation, I did my very best to make sure it was readable by everyone. In fact, when I presented my defense, because it was public, anybody could come see it, there were a lot of dog people in the audience.
Were there?
There were quite a few dog people, because you tell the dog people to be somewhere and they are all there.
Oh yeah.
It was great. So there's a bunch of dog people in the audience, and of course a lot of academics as well, because this is an academic endeavor. And so I spent a lot of my time bridging the worlds between the philosophy and the thinkers that I used, explaining them to the dog people, and then explaining this whole dog piece to the academics, explaining about breeding and standards and all this dog lingo that to the academic world so they could understand. So I was bridging these two worlds for the entire presentation. But the interesting thing was, and so the dissertation is readable by any population. That was my intention. Come here, Boris. Come here, you can't be investigating. Come over here. Come on. It's so funny. He's cleaning
I'm ready
the floor.
to take him
He's
home.
cleaning the floor. Good boy. So the piece itself is readable by anybody, but talking about profound awe. So when I was writing the dissertation, it took me like 8 years to write it. When I was writing it, I would have weekends that I would be writing, and I would have like these feelings of such intensity. Like I couldn't believe that my feelings were so overwhelming, and I would cry at the beauty of it all. It sounds very strange, but I would. When I was presenting the dissertation and talking about my work, and I looked out into my audience, I would see people at various times like welling up from these feelings that they have relating to their own dogs about how profoundly beautiful it is. When I talk about what happens when a breeder has a litter of puppies in that moment when they open their eyes and they go from being just a puppy, which, for a breeder it's more than just a puppy, but it goes from being a puppy that we care for and love to now who's in there. When they look back at you, you feel this instant connection. We call it the thou. It's Martin Buber calls it the I-thou connection, where this puppy then becomes an entity, a real entity. And so when I talked about that, the breeders were all crying. And when I talked about spending time on the couch with our dog at night, petting it and loving it and feeling like life is perfect and life is good with it, the pet people were crying. It was really quite an interesting experience and really showed the validity of my work.
So tell me, how many Cavaliers do you have?
I have 6 Cavaliers. And of course, I have 6 I show, and I do that business. So, after they're done with their show careers, I usually will find a nice pet home where they can be one of 1 or 2 rather than one of 6 or 7, and then start up a young one. So, in my house, I have that many Cavaliers, but they're kind of always
No more losses?
No more losses. No, they're I've gotten to the point now where there's a lot of upkeep. The coat is so long, and there's so much work that I wanted something that was less work.
He is quite the star.
Character. He's a character. He's a very good boy. And so these guys, they, English dog,
Yeah.
King Charles, filled the palace with these. The Blenheim Palace, they come in 4 colors. This, of course, being Blenheim, which is the orange and white. And they come in black and tan, ruby, and tricolor. But they love everybody. They love all people. They love all children. They love all other animals. They're really a wonderful breed of dog. I can have one toy and all 6 of them, and they don't fight over it, ever. And they all want to be in my lap, so I like that.
So you are you going to break your book, your dissertation, into a book?
Yes, I'm actually looking now for a publisher. Now, whether it will remain as an academic piece, because it has a lot of scholarly merit, to drive other scholars who want to write about similar topics, like maybe you can hook out your wagon onto any concept I have presented. There's many concepts in it that could be made into bigger studies. Or it could also be transformed into something for like mass market, where to talk about how the everyday relationships we have with dogs can bring us profound feelings of awe. Walking a dog, watching a dog play in the grass, going hiking with the dog, actually preparing your day, organizing your day around. You see the dog hair flying in the air?
Yes, I see that.
Preparing your day around, like organizing your day around feeding the dog and caring for your dog. That's an act that creates profound awe, creates connection to the universe.
And it gives a lot of people a purpose.
Yes. I just placed a Cavalier recently, like 2 weeks ago, with a woman in Maine, 92 years old, and wanted a dog. So I found her a nice adult retired dog, Cavalier, to take home. And she sent me an email saying, "This dog gives me a reason to get up in the morning now." They sleep, they sleep, and they share they sleep together. The dog's on the pillow next to her, and God love her, she uses the email, sends me an email. "Betty gives me a reason to get up in the morning." It's such a beautiful thing. 92 years old, has a dog.
That is amazing.
It is amazing. Yep, lives by herself, and so now she has this dog to organize her day around, and it's beautiful.
This has just been a marvelous experience, and we've got a few more minutes to talk.
Really?
Which is great. This is great. They're saying yes, go.
Excellent, excellent.
Excellent. So, where did you ever expect, when you were a perky and very talented young junior handler, did you ever dream that all of this would come true?
When I was in the 3rd grade, when the teacher went around the room and asked all the students, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I think it was, probably 6. The boys, firemen, the girls, nurses. She got to me, I want to be a farmer's wife. I never imagined when I was a young person that I would be this steeped in dogs and this passionate about it, even after this length of time. But I am really fulfilled and really happy with everything I've done, and will continue to do all I can with dogs.
And you are going to come, we're going to have you back. They're telling me that we are almost ready to wrap. So it was great to see you, and we're going to have you come back.
Thank you, Brian.
There is so much to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about.
And Boris, you are a star.
He's a good boy.
Thank you very much, and we're glad to have you, and welcome to Fur, Fins, and Feathers. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.